Dear everyone, my name is Xuechen Yuan. I'm a master's student and a publication team member of the Journal of the Canadian Association for Curriculum Studies, JCACS. Today, I'm greatly humbled and honored to host Dr. Xuesong Gao. Before we start this interview, I would like to briefly introduce Dr. Andy. Dr. Andy is a professor in language and literacy education at the School of Education, University of New South Wales. He has published extensively on topics including language learning strategy, language teacher education, and language education policy. He edits the International Review of Applied Linguistics in Language Teaching. He is also a principal associate editor for the Asia Pacific Education Researcher and an education sector editor for the Sage Open. Welcome, Professor Andy, and thank you so much for joining this interview with JCACS today. So hope we have a great discussion.
Thank you, Xuechen. Thank you, JCACS, and thank you for the invitation. And thank you for allowing me to have an opportunity to share my work and interact with you and with the broader audience.
Thank you, Andy. My first question is, your book, Strategic Language Learning, The Roles of Agency and Context, published in 2010 by Multilingual Matters, focuses on the socio-cultural experience of Chinese English learners studying at English Instruction University in Hong Kong. So my first question would be, what was the objective of this work? Since this book publication, what might be some of the changes you have seen or would like to see in the second language curriculum in China affecting students' English learning?
Thank you for the question. The book was based on my PhD thesis. So you asked me about what was my objective of the book, and partly because I wanted really do a good PhD. And also when I was doing PhD, I was aware that a lot of studies have been conducted on language learning strategies, and most of the studies adopt a very kind of a cognitive psychology perspective in their study, and I want to adopt an alternative theoretical perspective that is what we call social cultural perspective, trying to understand not only what language learners do in their strategic language learning, but also trying to understand why they do these things when they take in particular strategic actions in language learning. So basically, I wanted to sort of adopt a coordinated conceptual approach to understanding why language learners adopt particular strategic actions in language learning. So I use this, I just mentioned, social cultural perspective. And I try to argue that language learner strategies is not only part of the results of their cognition, but also emerges from the interaction between their cognition agency and contextual conditions. So when we try to understand language learners and their strategic behaviors, we need to put language learning and language learners in a broader social cultural context and try to understand what how language learners interact with the contextual conditions, including social cultural discourses about language learning, different social agents like parents, teachers, and other learners, and how contextual conditions mediate particular waves of learning and to language learners. So that's so the result. Language learning strategies is not only an outcome of a cognition agency, but also a result of interaction between learner agency and the context that they find themselves in. So that's why I conclude my book with a quote. Well, it's not with a sentence say strat use is not only a choice, but a choice facilitated by the context. And ever since the publication, it has received quite a lot of attention in the field. I don't know whether this book has influenced the way, how strategic language learning or language learning is conceptualized in second language curriculum in China. But I do know even before I published my book, second language curriculum in China has already incorporated notion of language learning strategies as part of the kind of a desired learning outcomes or a pedagogical focus in English language teaching. So I think this teachers are sort of expected or asked by education policymakers and curriculum developers to focus on strategic aspects of language learning, which just sounds it's a familiar story because when I was a student for language learning in China, my teachers used to talk about um, how we can learn languages more effectively. So so it's not a new idea, but it certainly becomes a very important idea in the second language curriculum in China. But it's not to do with my book, but I'm happy that my book or the ideas I advance will somehow help teachers to approach the task of promoting strategic language learning in language teaching.
Thanks, Andy. I think this is a great response. So I really like the way that you mentioned students' sociocultural experience and their cognitive structure is a result of the English language curriculum, but I think also their life circumstance. I think, just in my opinion, you can learn language in a curriculum, but how do you bring what you learn into real life? How do you connect the curriculum with the real life? It's another issue I think would be a great discussion to have. But thanks for the insight. I really appreciate that. I think this is very detailed. My second question is, if there is one book or work that has impacted your work as an established scholar in the field of second language curriculum and education in intercultural context, what is it and how did it impact your goal as a scholar in such a field?
Many people's works have influenced my work. So for instance, Andrew Cohen's on language learning strategies and Daniel Larson Freeman on complex dynamic system theory. All these people, just name a few. I mean, all these people's and their ideas, their works have contributed to, well, greatly influenced my work. But I want to highlight one of the recent article in monolanguage journal called Douglas Fir Group Framework. Well, this is an article trying to advance a new framework, trying to synergize different ideas in language learning research, second language acquisition research, in a context of multilingual world. They call themselves a Douglas Fir Group, which is a group of eminent scholars in the field of second language acquisition and language learning. And they want to advance a new framework to synergize different ways of conceptualizing language learning, second language acquisition. So they published an article in 2016 in Modern Language Journal called the Douglas Framework paper. I forgot exactly the title, but we call it Douglas Fir Group Framework. So I think this paper and the framework the paper try to promote have been really impacting on my thinking about language learning, language teaching, and language teacher education. Because first of all, trying to argue that we need to somehow systematically address issues like monolingual bias in second language acquisition and language learning research. We need to somehow embrace issues like justice, social inequity or equity in language education. So it much broaden the mission for language teachers and also gives language teacher educators a roadmap on how we can prepare language teacher for the challenges, well, maybe beyond beyond the language education programs. And also, of course, language teachers will be better prepared to help language learners to be prepared for the tasks or for the real life tasks they need to engage with beyond the classroom.
Yeah, I think this is a great insight as well. Again, it connects to like sociocultural aspect of language learning. I haven't really known anything about the Douglas approach, but I would like to stimulate myself and my other in the field to do that.
It's called Douglas Fir Group. It's basically it's not a particular person's name. It's a room where a group of eminent scholars in second language acquisition had a meeting and discussed how we can move forward in our research and synergize our research endeavors
Oh,
to
okay, okay.
achieve the best outcome for the society.
It was more like a panel, not kind of,
Yeah, it's kind of
yeah,
panel. It's
kind of
kind
like a
of
panel.
position paper,
Yeah.
which I think it will have a very profound influence on our research in the second language acquisition, in the field of secondary language acquisition or language education.
Thank you so much for this response. Uh, your work is centered on the intersectional point of language and curriculum. You have published many articles on second language learning, acculturation, and the intercultural curricular experience of international students abroad. Specifically, building on your personal experience of living in China, you wrote about the barrier that Chinese international students face, an obstacle to succeed in intercultural and second language curricula. How has your personal experience shaped your passion and understanding of the second language curriculum and education in intercultural context?
Um, I need to admit that I do research partly for the community, part for trying to understand my own experiences as well. So you're absolutely right. Asking this question about how my own experiences shape my understanding or passion of second language curriculum and education in the cultural context. I started as a researcher into mainland Chinese students' experience of language learning after they left mainland China. So that because I was one of them, I had experiences being a language learner in a context or in context outside of mainland China, which I experienced something very different from what I used to experience when I was in China. And then, of course, I also noticed that some students did extremely well in adapting themselves to the new context. Others seems to have some issues in adapting themselves to the new context. Now, I have to say, I think almost in the first 10 years of my career, I've been trying to understand how people who adapt really well to the new context, their experiences can help the students who apparently don't adapt themselves enough in a new context. But that's the first 10 years. So I'm trying to discover what these students did and why they did this sort of things and what they gains, what kind of gains they have achieved from doing the kind of strategic actions and they reported in the study. So I tried to understand why and also how. But then I also began to sort of a much more deep understand these students or my own students' experiences. And I began to appreciate why certain students don't adapt themselves well to a new context. And probably, and I also start appreciate there's also a good reason for them to not adapt themselves, well, not behave in particular ways that other students do in the same circumstance. So, it's not that they don't adapt themselves well, because I think began to realize that that's probably the norm. Because I mean, if you look at even local students, I mean, they come from different parts of the country, and when they come to the campus, they usually socialize with a person with similar kind of attributes. And so for some time, I problematized that Chinese students tend to socialize with Chinese students. Seems to be problematic. But then I realized that that's a kind of norm. People normally do these sort of things. It's actually quite a bit abnormal for students, for Chinese students or any students to leave their comfort zone to socialize with students with different kind of background and have different kind of experiences. although my research is still very much concerned with these students' experiences, but my perspective on this experiences has changed. And of course, I still believe it's important for language teachers to think of ways to prepare students to for the challenge beyond the classrooms, and to encourage students to move out their comfort zone, to socialize with people with that may have different kind of cultural linguistic backgrounds, because that's also another aspects of living in a multilingual, multicultural world. Inevitably, we have to work with and live with people with different cultural backgrounds. But I also acknowledge that it's quite normal for people to socialize and to work with people with similar cultural backgrounds as well.
So you were saying like Chinese students interacting with Chinese students. Yeah, that's definitely a pattern that all of Chinese students will probably see in every part of university in every country. This is because of the identity, right? The identity about what they
Yeah.
feel like they belong to.
And the values and the kind of cultural practice are very similar, and it's very normal for people with similar orientations and practices to come together. And that's the norm for local students as well. The local students tend to socialize with local students, or local students from particular, say in Canada, particular province, to socialize with particular kind of similar kind of class or family backgrounds, and to spend more time together. That's a very normal thing, I think. It's just that we, as language teachers, we need to remind them that at some point we need to deal or work with people with different backgrounds, how we can be prepared for this kind of a living or working with people with different backgrounds.
Thank you for your response. Your work, language, culture, and curriculum, lived intercultural experience of international students, that was published in 2021. Language, culture, and curriculum shed light on both linguistic and sociocultural implications, where your focus is on international students' pedagogical experience in intercultural curriculum based on their identity and a belief about second language. So in what way does your work contribute to the development of international students' linguistic identity? So you talk, for example, about second language ideology and how may this inform the second language curriculum?
My work, I mean, may help us to develop some sort of understanding of international students' identity and their ideology, how their identity and ideology play in their, say, experiences when they study abroad. If somebody want to take a message from, well, take some sort of draw and some implication from what I have found in my research, is we of course need to respect or to accommodate or to understand what students aspire to become, and what kind of thing they hold dear to, and what kind of thing they believe in. And that's the starting point of any pedagogical effort to engage with students. And that's actually nothing new about it, because we need to start with what students believe in, what students want to be. Our educators or responsibility, or as language teachers, what we can do is trying to help them to achieve what they want to achieve, or what they want to be. We cannot just focus on, say, language items, because I think in the particular studies you referred to, a lot of language teachers, Chinese language teachers, they're talking about international students in China. So when they teach Chinese language to international students in China, they'll be focusing on language items, grammatical items, vocabulary items, or grammar, or these sort of things. But these kind of proper language items or knowledge may not prepare them for the kind of a real life task outside the classrooms. For instance, when they go to do some shopping, or have a meal, or have wonderful social event with friends, and they need probably the other kind of language. Not even, they don't have to be perfect in their language use, but as long as they can interact with people engage with people and achieve what they want to achieve, say buy something or buying something, or having have a fun conversation with a friend, that should be fine. I think that our language students should focus on these sometimes implicit kind of language skills that they need for real life. And we have been pretty much preoccupied with correct way of saying things, doing things. But in fact, if everybody speak things very absolutely correctly, we may not sound very genuine, authentic in real life interaction. So some sort of mistakes or some sort of bias, sort of accents, or some sort of improper use languages may present us in a particular ways. And of course, we need to avoid a particular usage or particular pronunciation accents may portray us pretty badly in a negative way. But we can seize those what we sometimes we call errors, but actually they deviations from the standard. These forms that can present us in a positive way and make us more likable, make us more approachable. So the students need to know these sort of things. I think so. It's not really all about correctness. It has to be about appropriateness, the kind of the skills I need for being a genuine, authentic person when interacting, socializing with people.
I think what you said was important, allowing students to make error and allowing students to speak something that's not almost robotic. It also says something about the pragmatic usage of language. It's not going to be perfect, but it will be pragmatic that in a sense that students can use it to, for example, learn about science, learn about biology, learn about chemistry, like learn about those subjects where you don't just learn like word by word.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we language teaching should not just focus on the grammatically correct language use, but also focus on appropriate language use that works in real life contexts, socialization, and also disciplinary contexts, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think this is very important. So my next question would be, what work are relevant to curricula for second language instruction or international students learning that you're focusing on right now? What kind of work you're doing right now?
One of my recent efforts is to try to promote the idea of agency in language education. Agency has many different kind of definitions. Well, put it simply, let's call it kind of language learners' sense of ownership or feeling of ownership or sense of a feeling of feeling in control of learning process. So they feel that they own the learning process. They feel that they are able to control the learning process. That's a very important attribute that we want to, or characteristics of language learners, we want to see at the end of our language teaching efforts. Our language teaching efforts do not just pass on language knowledge to our students, but also trying to develop the kind of language learners that we think that will do well beyond the language classroom. So one of the key attributes of this kind of language learner will be, we want agency, and we want our language learner to be agentic. They feel they have a good ownership of the learning process. They feel they can manage, control the learning process. The reason is because the world outside the classroom is quite uncertain, full of challenges, and we can never tell all the tricks or knowledge that in response to specific challenges, and because there's so many of them and we can't really address every one of them. So we need to make sure that our learners have this kind of inner resources that when they see something happen and they can respond to the situation properly. It's pretty much like a vaccine. It's like there's so many viruses outside. When you got a vaccine or immune system and can respond to those emergent situations properly, so then we can, well, our language learners can survive and and thrive in new contexts in response to new situations.
Thank you so much for mentioning the sense of agency. It's similar to a lot of aspect of other learning or even acculturation. You learn a language, you don't learn word by word. When you just learn a half of things, then you develop strategies to fill the other half, like some uncertainty that you are not able to see at the moment. It's a good way to really increase the readiness for the future speech that you're not afraid of. I think something that Asian students may need improvement on is long-term orientation, like how we feel prepared for future encounter,
Yeah.
even if we have no idea what will come next.
Yeah.
Yeah. My last question would be relevant to what's happening right now. In the face of crisis of COVID-19, university online courses have becoming a driving force and a medium for intercultural education and second language learning. In online curricula, what shortcomings and exciting new directions would you address for research on second language curriculum and intercultural education?
This is a very big and relevant question. I won't call it a crisis because, well, in Chinese, when we talk about crisis, we talk about danger and opportunity. Well, I mean, obviously, situations that created so many inconveniences, disruption to our life and work, but it does provide a lot of opportunities to try out new things. For instance, online education, online language teaching. There's a lot of studies trying to explore how language teachers trying to engage language learners interactively, how to enhance language learners' engagement in online learnings. Online learning I mean, whether we have this pandemic or not, in the future will be part of language education. So the kind of experience we have accumulated in the process of delivering online language courses as a result of pandemic will become a wealth of experiences and wisdom for us to continue our innovative online language education efforts. I mean, think about the technology and the online platforms we have, and without them, we won't be able to have these kind of conversations here. And it's not possible for you to talk to somebody in Australia while you are in Canada. So it's really exciting because that online learning has created so many exciting potential that we can reach out far, well, as far as possible. I mean, or talk to people or interact with people that we could never dreamed of interacting with in the past before the pandemic. So it really gives us a good opportunity to explore this direction. But of course, I mean, interaction is never the same to the face-to-face kind of a interaction on site and at the same place. While the online language learning provides a lot of opportunities, you can do new things, we can have new exposures, but it's never the same. Well, I mean, we do need at some point have this kind of face-to-face on-site interaction, have a real sense of a human interaction. And that will be definitely more even more motivating. But I mean, having said this, I mean, the current situation offers a lot of opportunity to explore new things, but I personally do feel that it doesn't have that kind of same human interaction when we have opportunities to talk to each other in the same room. But in the future, we may have both, which is great.
I really like this comment. In a current sense, like a lot of damage or disruption to the university infrastructure would cause problem, but we are saying like 危机感, right? It's like having opportunity in the emergency. In the future, this period will be a history, part of the history that will allow definitely new opportunity to emerge. I do have one question. What do you think teacher at the moment would respond to technology?
That's a big question. I think I should have mentioned this. I think a lot of teachers are tired of using technology. You might have, even in contexts like Canada or Australia, you may have a lot of teachers who decide to resign because of they're fed up with this technology and technology using and teaching. I mean, I always like to see two sides of the story. I mean, there's definitely, I mean, of course, we have when we have in human face-to-face interaction in the same classroom. There's of course a lot of advantages associated with this kind of interaction. But we are in this kind of a current situation. We have to do a lot of things online. And although some people feel tired of delivering things online, but this is kind of historical opportunity for us to learn about how to do online learning and teaching properly. And we would never have this kind of a drive to learn to teach online properly if there were no pandemic. And once we have learned how to teach online language courses or other courses properly online, and this kind of experience, this kind of knowledge, understanding, wisdom will become part of repertoire knowledge, understanding. So they will become very useful when we allow normal life returns. So we can figure out a way, although we know face-to-face interaction in the same classroom will be very enriching, but we can even create things that add the rich experiences we could have through face-to-face in classroom interaction with the technology. So in the future, when the normal life comes back or returns, we not only have this rich experiences in the classroom face-to-face, but we have the added benefits of technology, which will allow students in the classroom with physically bound to explore new opportunities to interact with people that they would never dream of interacting in the furthest corner of the world. And so I imagine that after the pandemic, education will be much enriched by the kind of experience we somehow were forced to go through today.
It's almost like we are forced to have this experience. It has two benefits. I think first it's for the better readiness for technology use in the future classroom.
Yeah.
And the second would be, at the moment, I can think of students who prefer self-study would benefit from the technology.
Yeah. So for instance, in the future classroom, when we talk about differentiation in teaching, we have a new means of differentiation. In the past, we have to provide differentiated instruction within the same classroom. Now we can think of using technology to offer differentiated instruction to certain students in the same classroom. So, I mean, for many of us, we suffer a lot, but we also learn a lot, and our learning will be very useful for the future education practice. And of course, one of the downside of the thing is, of course, we need somehow good preparation, good support for teachers who can use technology effectively for in teaching.
Thank you so much. I think this is a great end to this question and also a great end to this interview. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Looking forward to see you in the future.